And the recording will be posted within a day or two after that Friday session. And that's because I realize with busy schedules, it may be necessary to miss a Friday, and then you can go back in and pick it up
Okay.
by looking online, and it will mark you as completed when you view that. So you should have received a welcome letter from Joni, and I'm sure you did. That's how you were able to log into the system. She did send you a training agenda. Looks like this. It was one of the attachments. I wanted to just point out that the training agenda lists the things that you do between each one of our sessions. They call it pre-work, and then what we will be covering in each one of these sessions. And this is done this way so that it kind of mimics the kind of class that they intend you to teach, and that is that your students will work online to get some of the knowledge, and then you'll have a live session with them where you will kind of solidify that knowledge, put them into some discussion sessions. You may give them some exercises to do, maybe field work to do, and then they'll have more online learning. So this is in the educational field, this is called blended learning, and that's what this is all about with blended learning. The couple of things I want to note, though, is that there are, within the LMS, there is class discussions and reflections. And you'll hit them both in some of the lessons. In class discussions, whatever you write, the other one will be able to see, and it's intended that you would comment back and forth on each other's class discussions. The reflections, only I will be able to see the reflections. So that's just your personal views on, it's going to ask you at some point, what do you think of the class, or what is your vision for how you would use this, etc. I wanted to make mention, I know both of you are in economic development. So you're primarily focused around getting businesses into town and getting them started. And I wanted to note for you that this particular course may sound like it is anti-business, but I want to just caution you, just hang in there and you'll see where it fits as we go along. It's a mindset class, so it fits prior to like the fast track class that you may be using. So they'll put that in the proper perspective as we go along. So just keep an open mind about what the claims are made about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. We're going to be redefining entrepreneurship and the mindset as we go along. And that's about it. Any questions before we start? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the slides with you. Are you both seeing the Mindset Facilitator certification training screen? Okay, this training at its core is designed to explore a few key questions. The first one being, how do ordinary people who have no particular advantage in life manage to alter their place in socioeconomic structure? And how do regular people, even though they don't have outsized personalities or may not have big ideas or access to capital, power, or privilege, how do they make an impact on the world? What ELI has discovered is that there are a set of common and controllable factors that help people achieve this larger impact. They're factors that anyone can learn and develop within their entrepreneurial mindset and give them the tools that they need to successfully navigate and our complex world here. Before we get started on the training, you should know that ELI really doesn't think of entrepreneurship as a business discipline. That's because if you think of entrepreneurship as a business discipline, you're unwittingly going to create a barrier that prevents you from truly understanding the behavioral phenomena behind the entrepreneurial mindset. The attributes and behaviors that are those that go along with entrepreneurial mindsets are as we're going to show you, are useful in school and the workplace and just life in general, not just for starting a business. So the first, I want to introduce you to these two people. I know Freddie, you did the online course, right? Monty, did you do that one?
Yes, I'm nearly done with it, but I've read the book.
Okay, so you know who these two people are then. The gentleman on the left is Gary Schaueneiger. He is the co-author of the book, but he's also the founder and CEO of ELI. And the way that this whole process got started, that was in 2008, Gary Schaueneiger was hired by Cisco Entrepreneur Institute in San Jose to undertake a study on entrepreneurship education in North America. His job was to fill in the gaps with programming where whatever was lacking within entrepreneurship training. What he found was that the way entrepreneurship was being portrayed in the classroom or in small business development centers wasn't really a reality of what was typical entrepreneur was actually doing. From there, so Cisco then gave him a platform to go and do interviews with about 600 entrepreneurs and to kind of sort out some of the common factors so they can determine what makes an average person an entrepreneur. And in his travels, he ran across a gentleman named Clifton Taubert, and that's the gentleman in the right. Clifton had at that time had already written 15 books and was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize on one of those books. It was a book that was made into a major motion picture called Once Upon a Time When We Were Colored. Clifton was also a well-known speaker who made significant impact on improving race relations in the U.S. He brought his advocacy to a couple of administrations in the federal government. And one of the things that he may have, you may or may not be aware of, is that he was one of the founders of a company called Stairmaster. Do both of you know what Stairmaster is or was? It's a exercise equipment. He was one of the founders of that company, and he helped bring that to the U.S. and to retail market. And the picture, this picture is an original photograph of Uncle Cleve. Uncle Cleve had only, this is the person that Clifton was writing about. He only had completed school up to the 4th grade. And at the time, in the southern US, African Americans had to use different bathrooms than whites that weren't allowed in local banks, and they generally were considered second-class citizens. But Clifton described how his uncle was the owner and operator of an ice house. He was the only person in his community that put money in the bank. He described how he didn't flaunt his money. His work truck was old, but he saved up and was able to start another little business and another little business. He was quite a little entrepreneur. This experience that Clifton had working for his uncle is what brought about this book called Who Owns the Ice House? And the 8 life lessons that it talks about is what is the basis of this particular course. Since the publication of this book, more than 100,000 books have been sold around the world. And the book and associated programs have been used in universities, community colleges, secondary education schools, economic development programs, small business assistant programs, and locations around the globe to guide students toward a more entrepreneurial mindset. The city of Albuquerque used this to change how city government worked. They put anyone in any department through the course, and it changed how those departments began to look at their customers, the citizens in the city, and it completely changed how city government worked. So in 2011, through the funding of the Kauffman Foundation, the Ice House Entrepreneurship program was born. This program dives more deeply into the 8 life lessons that's spelled out in Who Owns the Ice House. And since that time, the ELI has developed 3 other programs around the 8 life lessons. There are 4 different versions of this program that you can teach. One is the student success version, which is meant for high school and college students. Another is a middle school edition. There's the original edition that they created, and then they took the original edition and altered it slightly to become a small business edition. Using the programs as a baseline, they developed this facilitator training that you're going through right now to help provide you with resources you need to help your students in the entrepreneurial mindset. So as we begin, a key thing to remember is the world has changed in ways we now require everyone to be able to think like an entrepreneur. And you're going to see that as we talk about the intricacies of entrepreneurial mindsets. With the pace of change that we see in our world today, we all need to be thinking like an entrepreneur. Another way to think about this is that the mindset that once enabled us to succeed is rapidly becoming maladaptive in the face of change. This is all brought about through how fast things are changing in our world. The problem is that the subject of entrepreneurship is not well understood. It remains to this day shrouded in myths and misconceptions that hinder our ability to adopt these ideas and be innovative and entrepreneurial. This training is going to help you get beyond those myths and misconceptions and to best teach others how to be more innovative and entrepreneurial in their lives. So before we get to the main part of the training, it's important to have a common understanding of the term entrepreneurial mindset. Some of the questions that you might want to be reflecting on in this training is this: what is an entrepreneurial mindset? Where does it come from? Why is it important? And how can we develop it in ourselves and others? When the training is complete, you should be able to answer most of those things. So in case you thought this course was going to be about business, it really isn't. It's going to be what precedes most groups or most individuals when they think about they want to start a business. This is about what happens prior to that. To truly understand the entrepreneurial mindset, we have to understand the psychology of an everyday entrepreneur. And so we're going to dive into these 3 areas that can impact, but it can impact anyone, not just the ones that are interested in starting their business. A thorough understanding of cognitive, motivational, and situational factors that impact us all is what we're about to undertake here in these 4 sessions. So let's start by looking at 2 fundamental ideas that help us to get a strong understanding of entrepreneurial mindsets. First, we're going to redefine entrepreneurship in a way that anyone can embrace. When we look at the existing definitions of an entrepreneurship, they're kind of misleading in today's society. They're definitely antiquated. If you search for the definition, it's going to tell you something like someone who organizes and operates a business, or it's going to say someone who takes a risk in exchange for a profit. Through ELI's work of interviewing nearly 600 entrepreneurs over the last decade, these definitions don't line up with the core essence of this definition. Uh, for example, have you ever heard the term social entrepreneurship? It's generally applied to someone who's solving a problem for others somewhere around the world, but their intention was not to create a business and make profit from it. The profit that they get from their entrepreneurship is helping other people. There are also people who think like an entrepreneur that work within an existing company, but don't actually go and start their own business. And a common term has been given to them called entrepreneurs. But what we see is that not everyone wants to start a business. So defining an entrepreneur as someone who organizes and operates as a business kind of leaves out the vast majority of population who might benefit from developing the same kind of mindset. We all are inherently desirous and capable of contributing and solving problems, of being engaged with a better life for ourselves while we're contributing to our communities and solving problems for others. By redefining entrepreneurship, we can impact a much larger portion of our students than even those who never thought of themselves as an entrepreneur. The second idea that we're going to look at is that of throwing around a term that's loosely used without really understanding it. It's difficult to find a clinical definition of entrepreneurship. ELI looked at Carol DeWick and her work. She wrote a book while she was a professor at Stanford called Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. And she described this mindset as a new way of thinking, which doesn't provide us much to work with. So in the section of slides, we're also going to cover a redefinition of the entrepreneurship and what a mindset is. So let's first look at redefining entrepreneurship. We often associate entrepreneurship with the high growth entrepreneurs we often read about in the media, those who secure venture capital investment to develop new technologies, social media platforms, global services that suddenly and seemingly overnight become household names. But as we know from the data, that while this is highly visible, these examples like Elon Musk are statistical rarities. Only a tiny infinitesimal fraction of the whole of entrepreneurship actually started this way. Even in the United States, where the world looks for us to produce these types of venture-backed, high-growth startup companies, only a little less than 1% of new businesses were actually started this way. So when you trying to understand the essence of entrepreneurship, we have a visibility versus a representation issue that kind of skews our understanding of how to be an entrepreneurial, but also who can be entrepreneurial. Rather than telling ourselves that the entrepreneurial world is the executive domain of the elite, usually young white males, elite universities, we need to see a full picture and come to the understanding that the vast majority of these new businesses were started by everyday people who don't have advanced degrees or access to venture capital. If you were to walk down the main street of any of our cities, you would see these everyday entrepreneurs and mom and pop shops, small businesses all over the place. So the other common misunderstanding we see is thinking of entrepreneurship through the lens of a small business, as in the main street small business owner who owns a restaurant or maybe a flower shop. When this is done, those trying to help these small business owners tend to confuse entrepreneurial attitudes and skills with managerial attitudes and skills. And we're going to make a clear distinction between managerial and entrepreneurial in a few moments. The the main problem we see is that many entrepreneurial programs look at a small business as if they're just a smaller version of a large corporation. This tends to, it doesn't really seem to work well to provide the motivation and persistence needed to succeed. So we're going to illustrate this point, I want to show you a study from a Harvard professor, Amar Bidet, who examined the origins and evolutions of new businesses. He looked at more than 200 large established companies, Inc. 500 companies, such as Waste Management, Walmart, Hewlett-Packard, and Microsoft. Bidet found that these organizations were likely to have what he referred to as humble, improvised origins. Typically, they had no big ideas or breakthroughs, not much planning, not much research, not much experience, not much money, yet somehow they were able to succeed. The question is how? To look at this data for a moment and ask yourself, how does that happen? How does an inexperienced, unfunded entrepreneur take a recognizable idea and transform it into something sustainable that makes a larger impact on the world? At ELI, we couldn't find a curriculum anywhere that the world that was using nascent entrepreneurs that could even remotely explain how this happens. After all, they don't have breakthrough ideas. They're not writing business plans. They're not conducting market research. They don't have much money or experience or access to large sums of money. The answers to this fundamental question have become the basis for the Ice House entrepreneurship programs and this training. So with a better understanding of realities that a typical entrepreneur has, then let's think about what we and what your students should care about. In 1776, Adam Smith, in a book he wrote called An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of Wealth of Nations, he wrote, "We all live by exchanging." This basic statement is profound, and if you really think about it. In order to navigate our way in the world, we're using our time, our skills, our connections, our capabilities to meet the needs of other people. In exchange, we may receive money or love or respect or promotions. It's a question we all need to be asking ourselves. What is it that you exchange with and who with? When life is looked at this way, we're all entrepreneurs who are providing some sort of services in exchange for something of value. The 8 life lessons that we're going to discuss in a few moments are built to provide a roadmap to ensure that you're best prepared to participate in this particular exchange. So as we continue to illustrate this, we're going to look at transformation theory. This was adapted from George Land and Beth Jarman in a book called Breakpoint and Beyond, Mastering the Future Today. This is where, when I first was introduced to this material, this is where it began to click for me and where the mindset fit into the whole scheme of entrepreneurship. It kind of works like this. I'm going to talk about a living organism, but it could also be a company or an organization or an individual. These 3 phases of any living organism include, these are phases that we find ourselves in. The first is a discovery phase. Then there's a growth phase. And finally, there's an obsolescence phase. In some cases, the obsolescence becomes a reinvention phase, in which case a new S-curve then begins again. These 3 phases of change are unavoidable facts of life. There's no getting around this. And interestingly enough, each of these 3 phases requires a distinct set of rules for survival. And those rules will not work in the next phase. Orange dots between these phases represent breakpoints, which are moments in time when the rules of survival change. But in reality, there's no orange dot that shows up. So it may be hard for us to determine at what point ourselves or our business or our organizations are at that break point and need to change the rules by which we operate under. I first saw this many years ago when I was an elder in a church in South Daytona. It was a church that had started back in the 30s. It had grown large as far as churches in the Daytona area. We were pushing 800 people at one point in 3 different services. But suddenly we began losing more and more and more people. And what we found was the discovery phase is when someone started the church, we began inventing what we wanted to do, the types of services, what we wanted to teach. And then we found that at the first break point, it was working. So then we just replicated that all along. But then somewhere along the line, we reached a point to where the second break point, we became obsolete because the type of services we were using wasn't what the people wanted. They wanted to go for more modern services somewhere. And so it was necessary to reinvent what the church was about and then go again. This happens in a lot of different churches as they get to some point. And the point that's going to be made shortly is that when you get to this second break point, the tendency is to drop back and you do the things that you were doing that made the church successful. That was the things at the first break point. And that doesn't work because the world has changed, society has changed, church has changed, the people in the congregation have changed. So it's time to instead come up with new ideas and reinvent themselves. You may or may not have heard the quote from the CEO of Kodak. When Kodak was growing, they were in their growth phase. At the second break point, the iPhone was introduced. And the CEO of Kodak was famous for making a statement, well, that's just stupid. Who would ever want to take a picture with their phone? And they went into obsolescence rather than reinventing themselves. So this graph fits almost every organization and individual and company that's there. We're going to go through a little bit of it to see what it's about. The discovery phase is where an organism is searching for a connection with its environment, and as it explores the world, it finds itself. And replication is it's found its connection, and it's the first break point. And now it's ready to replicate that process to grow. Then it reaches a second break point where it's not growing anymore. So it runs into obsolescence phase or possibly a reinvention phase. So if we go back and look at this as humans, then we as adults survive every day by making ourselves useful to other humans. But when we are young, we require guidance and support from our parents and our caregivers. We're in the discovery phase, and we have other directed learning. Someone else is teaching us. Once we're old enough, we enter school where we learn how to become useful to other humans. That's the growth phase. But there's a change in paradigm here. We no longer direct our own work. The teachers in school are directing what we are going to be learning. The assumption here is that we used to navigate this phase of rule-bound systems. They're routine tasks, linearity and stability, and there's a centralized control. During this phase, we get better and better at whatever useful thing that we're exchanging with our organization and the world. But then we reach the second break point. It could be burnout. It could be in the real world that we're reaching a retirement point. The second break point is where we often struggle to adapt. And as Land and Jarman pointed out in Breakpoint and Beyond, the attitudes and skills that were absolutely essential for the growth phase in phase 2 now prevent you from adapting into a reinvention phase in phase 3. The more successful you are, the more you've been in phase two, the more expertise you have, and then more likely you are to struggle in the reinvention phase because you begin to hold on to your old ideas that it's going to keep you going. At that second breakpoint, we generally respond inappropriately to the slowed growth. We blame others, we become angry, we want to go back the way things used to be. Organizations jettison non-essential personnel, we jettison non-essential projects, we go back to the basics. And all this doesn't make a bit of difference in the survival of the company. Ultimately, we have to be when we're faced with these complex adaptive challenges, we have to reinvent ourselves or become obsolete. So Jared Diamond wrote in a book, the values to which people cling to most stubbornly under inappropriate conditions are those values that we were previously the source of our greatest triumphs. In the church example I gave you, many of the people in the congregation said, well, wait a minute, we just need to go back the way things were 20 years ago because it was working for us then. Let's go back and do that. But the world has changed. People have changed. So that generally is what people try to do, and it doesn't really work. So we're going to look more closely to the discovery phase. Now I want to put it in context of other entrepreneurial forces. When you are in phase two, where you're replicating that growth, you're really working with more managerial skills. Your accounting, your marketing, all the things that you would teach them on starting a business and keeping the business going. That is the phase two in this graph. Prior to that, the phase one in this graph is the mindset. It's what enabled that person to get to that point where they now have viable product, which comes at breakpoint one. So in this discovery phase, it's generally unstable and ambiguous. Self-directed, we're making the decisions, and we're generally resource constrained. We generally don't have a lot of funds or people or connections or resources to be able to pull off what we want. So we have to be creative. And in fact, this is where the incubators come into play here, where you can feed those things that they're lacking to them. How do we learn to make ourselves useful to other humans outside known systems without the benefit of a professional teacher or a predetermined path or predictable outcomes? Are we self-directed or are we other-directed? Many of us unwittingly adopt an idea that someone else is going to tell us what to do, what to learn, how to become successful when we develop this external focus locus of control. When it comes to our ability to create a value and make ourselves useful, we need to question this line of thinking and approach it from a different mindset. These are the types of circumstances where entrepreneurial mindsets will shine. We're going to look in depth in this. Let's zoom in a little bit and look at the discovery phase. During this phase, we're trying to figure out how to make ourselves useful to other humans. We might have found a problem and we're working on solutions to that problem, but we're doing it in an unstructured or a less structured way than we were when we were relying upon our educational systems. And if we're coming up with something new, then there's not a lot of people that can guide us to the right path because we're trying to find the right path. And you as facilitators in this endeavor are going to be helping guide them towards the right path. We're operating outside of our known systems. We're finding our own way to be useful. Our resources are short. When we find that connection, we enter into the next phase, and all of this is generally self-directed. When the connection is found, then we move on to starting a business. The rules for survival in this phase are different from the others. In this phase, we need problem finding skills, empathy, curiosity, observation, and inquiry. We need problem solving skills. We need creativity and innovation, critical thinking, experimentation and adaptation, collaboration and teamwork, networking, effective communication, and resourcefulness. And these are the things that the Ice House course will begin to help them learn how to fit into this phase and how to develop these particular characteristics in order to survive. So let's go back to our definition of entrepreneurship. When we think of entrepreneurship this way, rather than as a business discipline, anyone can consider themselves to be an entrepreneur and work on building their entrepreneurial skills. So we want to use this definition. It's a self-directed pursuit of opportunities to create value for others. And by creating value for others, we empower ourselves. So the second thing we want to look at is an understanding of mindset as a hidden mechanism that influences our behavior. We're going to look at an example of an iceberg here shortly that's going to help us understand where our mindset comes from. But each of us grew up in a different environment. We have different influences in our environment. And all of those things that we learned when we were younger have influenced what our behavior is like and what our beliefs are like. And that's the mindset that we're going to be talking about. This quote comes from David Foster Wallace, in which he was telling a story about two young fish swimming along. They pass an older fish, and the older fish says, "Good morning, fellas, how's the water?" And the two young fish keep swimming until one of them looks at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" Wallace goes on to say that sometimes the most obvious important realities are the ones that are the hardest to see. Sometimes the mindset that we have was built over years and years of our experiences through life, and it's hard to see realities that are different than what we think that what we grew up with. So we all have a mindset, yet few of us are actually aware of it, much less the ways in which it influences our behavior without our awareness. The reality is that most of us are just swimming along, immersed in a general managerial culture with a mindset that has been adopted to best operate in this type of managerial water. And we find ourselves in, and we never stop to consider how this mindset could be influencing our behavior without our awareness. To kind of make this a little bit more understandable, let's take a look at this analogy. We all know that an iceberg shows a little bit on top, but there's a lot more that's underneath the surface of the water. And at level 1 here, this is the visible artifacts and observable behavior. If you were to look at anyone that would be in your classes, this what you see and observe and their behaviors, what you would assume is going to be their mindset. But if you look deeper, we go down to level 2. This is explicit knowledge and espoused values. An individual will become aware of this knowledge and these values over their life, and this is the kind of things that they will use to influence their decisions on anything they do, including starting a business. But level 3 is the deeply held values that are taken for granted. These are assumptions that they have created based upon their upbringing. As an example, I'm not going to talk too much about politics, but my parents have always been Democrats. And he's been talking to me recently about what's going on within the government, et cetera. And I said, well, you're a Democrat, right? He says, yes. I said, well, tell me what that means to you. And what he described to me wasn't anything at all like what Democrats stand for today, but it's the deeply held values that they were taught when they were young. And that's what then influences level 2 and then level 1. Oftentimes, what's going to happen is you're going to find students as you're teaching them and helping them in your incubators to create new businesses, that they're going to have deeply held values that that you're going to recognize are not entirely true, but they're things that they have taken for granted because of their upbringing and the things that they have learned. That deeply held values is going to affect their observable behavior. And part of this course is going to be to let them see and understand what those deeply held values are, and let them understand that there are other ways to think about life in general, not just your business, how to find out what's going on within your particular realm of interest. So let's look at mindset dimensions just for a second. There are 5 critical mindset attributes that help us differentiate an entrepreneurial mindset from a managerial mindset. One is the locus of control. Someone who has an internal locus of control believes that for the most part, they're responsible for their own outcomes in their lives. Whereas people who have an external locus of control assume that fate, luck, circumstances, or powerful others are controlling their lives. Motivation is the next one. Those who are extrinsically motivated only do things only when they know there's a reward that's attached to it. There are those who are intrinsically motivated to the task, and for them, the joy and well-being that the task provides is what motivates them. Have either one of you read the book Drive by Daniel Pink? Drive was a study he undertook to determine what really motivates a worker in today's businesses. And what he came to find out is that money is only a motivator up to a certain point, but their work environment, the autonomy that they would be able to have within their work means far more in making them happy in their work than the rewards that they would get if they were totally intrinsically motivated. The next part of mindset is fixed versus growth orientation. Those with a fixed mindset believe that their skills and abilities are not changeable, whereas those with a growth mindset believe that their skills and abilities can be improved through diligent practice. This belief has an enormous influence on the type of goals we set for ourselves. We're going to find that entrepreneurial mindset, those who are successful entrepreneurs always have a growth orientation. They always want to learn new things. They're constantly in a realm of learning what's new, what's necessary. I'm getting over a cold, so I've got hot water I'm sucking on here. Resilience is the next one. Higher levels of resilience come through an optimistic outlook. And those who are more pessimistic tend to have a more difficult time recovering from adversity. As both of you well know, when you're starting something new, you're going to run into barriers often. And it's that resilience and persistence that's going to take you through and keep you moving forward on it. And the last one is the self-efficacy. This is the concept that through my own actions, I can reach my goals. In this concept, there's an idea that our beliefs, about our own abilities, not only determine our goals we set for ourselves, but the extent to which we can keep working towards those goals when we're faced with challenges and setbacks. So as our mindsets are developed over time, they become a fixed way of thinking that creates a powerful incentive to reach past in order to decide what to do in the future. Those with an entrepreneurial mindset regularly use their imagination, which allows them to break from the past. Rather than drawing on their memory, they're using imagination to solve problems that they face and think of new approaches to existing processes. Our mindset regulates the output we get from the capabilities that we have. We generally will have information overload within our minds when we're looking at solving a particular problem and looking at the ways that things have been done in the past. The way the mindset works in our brains is our brains are inundated with just billions of bits of data that pour into our five senses every second. So our brains are only able to process a few of these. So our brains have a way of developing filtering systems that block out things that it deems irrelevant or non-threatening. If you're not looking for opportunities, you're just not going to see them. So you're going to walk right past them 5 times a day. Because of this information overload, the brain is always trying to reduce cognitive load. Do you remember when you first learned to drive, how attentive you were to every mile that you were going, all the instruments, what was happening on the road ahead of you, the car next to you, the car in front of you, the car behind you, and you were learning those things. But once your mind got used to what's necessary to put our attention on what's not, then you begin to drive without even thinking about those things. And you're looking more for the exceptions to the rule, the things that are threatening to us, like maybe a dog running out in front of you in a road. So that's the way the mind works, and filtering out things that it knows it can do, but you don't need to worry yourself with it. Once we learn something, we can accept it to be the correct way to perceive, think, and act and feel in relation to a particular problem or pursuit and a particular goal. Our brains relegate it to habitual control. Eventually, from an evolutionary perspective, our mindset is a feature that we want the future to look like the past. Our mindset becomes a bug, becomes a problem, and will hinder us when we use the future, when we want the future to look exactly like the past. It becomes hindrance. For instance, when we're in a growth phase for transformation theory, that's the column 2, our mindset allows us to get faster and more efficient over time. It enhances our capabilities at that point. But when we're faced with a change and ambiguity, our mindset now becomes a hindrance to our ability to adapt to that change, because our mindset is set to tell us internally, oh, that's not threatening. We know how to do this. We can keep it going. So this brings us to a few key elements of the mindset we need to consider. One, we need to learn how to analyze our mindset to determine whether it's hindering or enhancing our capabilities based upon the situation we're currently in. And 2, we need to also, when we're faced with change, we need to consider our mindset is it hindering our ability to adapt? How many times have you talked to somebody who has reached a point within their company where they're losing customers and for some reason they're refusing to evolve their product or adapt their product to something else? That's their mindset being a hindrance, because they see a change, but they don't really want to deal with that particular change. This key assumption distinguishes the entrepreneurial person from others. People who are operating on a level 3 assumption from the iceberg chart, that it's their think that it's their responsibility to make themselves useful to others, and by doing so, they can be better off than they were going to be. The assumption creates a powerful incentive to learn. So we're going to redefine entrepreneurial mindset as it's my responsibility to figure out how to make myself useful to others. And by doing so, I'm going to empower myself. Making this key assumption part of someone's mindset girds them against the trials of life. So let's go back to those dimensions. The underlying assumption in place. The entrepreneurial practice comes through solving problems for other people. Here is how we need to look at the entrepreneurial mindset. It is an internal locus of control. People with an entrepreneurial mindset believe that they have the ability to influence their own outcomes rather than letting their circumstances determine the course of their lives. Their person with an entrepreneurial mindset find a way to tap into their intrinsic motivation. They take pleasure in the task itself rather than any intrinsic rewards perceived or performing the task. A person with an entrepreneurial mindset consistently demonstrates a growth orientation when faced with new things to learn. Individuals believe that they can grow and develop through the action, and they're focusing on learning rather than performing. They're resilient in the face of challenges. They tap into an optimistic explanatory style, seeing changes as temporary and fixable rather than permanent and unfixable. And they develop a high level of self-efficacy. They feel that they can create their future through their own actions despite the circumstances. So we're going to take a little 5-minute break here. I've been talking for a while. My voice needs a little bit of a rest here. I know we've set these up for 2-hour sessions, and if we had a lot of students, we would really need that. So I expect that we'll be done long before the 2 hours are up. So let's take this 5 minutes. If you need to go to the restroom, do that. Let's say why don't we say at 1 o'clock, we are back online here.
Okie dokie.
And we will, when we come back, we're going to go into a series of situations and discussion on those situations.
Okay.
We'll see you at 1.
Sounds good.
Monty, I'm gonna be over in your area tomorrow.
Oh
My,
yeah.
my
What
wife,
for?
my wife likes craft fairs. We're going to the Mount Dora one tomorrow.
Oh, I didn't realize that's tomorrow. I've been out of town. That's good to know though, because that means there'll be like 15,000 more people in town.
Yeah, this is the thing that's done once a year, I guess, the big one.
How long have you been coming to that?
Um, we go to Mount Dora often to look around, but we've never gone to the craft fair there.
It's pretty big. My grandmother had a store there 18 years, and my sister would always come over the during this weekend and help her out. Um, it's pretty big. I'm impressed that they've been able to garner, I mean, just a little 15,000, populous town to get the kind of attention they get in that little downtown. It's kind of amazing. I don't know how they've done it. I guess just years and years of infomercials in Miami or at those resorts in Orlando. I don't know. But good. Okay. Yeah, let me know if you want any recommendations.
All right. Um, is Freddie back on?
It seems so.
I could only see one of you at a time.
Oh, I have a dog with me.
Okay.
It was two.
Okay. I forgot to mention earlier that I'm doing this from my home office and I have a dog that has to be next to me all the time. And after a little while, she'll get behind me on the daybed and she will do something really annoying. Oh, so if she does something annoying, let me know.
No, you're okay. I have somebody with me too. So you're good. Like
Okay,
he's
so now we're gonna let's look at one. What I want you to do is think about one concept that either was new or stuck out in your mind from the presentation, maybe something you don't agree with. One thing, and let's talk about it. Was there anything that stuck out in what we talked about so far?
I wouldn't say like I don't agree with, but like the internal and external,
Motivation?
yeah, like I won't say it's like I can't say I disagree with anything that you were really saying because it's all like true. But I just know that that's something that you have to convince a lot of people to kind of get out of, because you're probably your worst critic, because so you automatically will kind of talk yourself out of things.
Yeah.
Business owner or as a potential business owner, like those who are like thinking of it, they're having the rumblings of it. They always think because you have outside factors, family or just circumstance that kind of tell you like
Well, let me just say that you have to at least make enough money or bonuses or whatever to support your family. Until you reach that point, your extrinsic motivation is the most important thing for you. But I found that when I was running a technology department, that if I found the hot spot for each one of my staff members and let them work within that area, they enjoyed their work so much more and it was more intrinsically motivated. For example, I had a network administrator who he just liked building things. He he took a lot of time, sometimes more than I thought would be necessary, to create something new out of a bunch of parts. So there was a project we had to undertake where we were going to get 10 laptop computers, put it in a trunk so that it can be easily moved around, add Wi-Fi to it, power to it, et cetera, making it a mobile computer lab. And when I gave that project to him, it meant a lot to him because he took even went and got foam insulation for the trunk and carved them out to fit every one of the laptops. It was just what he really liked doing. And that was he didn't get any more money for doing that, but it was intrinsically motivated there. And that's an example of what we're really talking about. When you're an entrepreneur, a lot of things you do are going to be for your own satisfaction, not so much making the money. Anything, Monty?
I've got two things. The first one is in listening to some of the videos from the book and then from Amard Bade. Uh, a lot of what Freddie and I do are trying to coerce, not to speak for you, Freddie, but especially as far as Fast Track's concerned, especially since this is a prequel of what is that gateway zinger to get people to go from mindset to little or no planning to soft launch, micro experimentation to okay, you absolutely need a business plan for a fluid business plan for growth and success and funding. Um, so that's an interesting part of Gary's research and a lot of the videos. Those people didn't have business plans, and how do we make sense of telling? It's hard getting people that are already in business to come back and make a business plan, or this entrepreneurial mindset's super important to give people the confidence to start in business, but where is the key to link those two together within the course, I guess?
Well, first of all, I think if they're going to go to a bank or a commercial lender or somebody for funding, they need a business plan. That should be your basic draw. And
Right.
I've had two different computer businesses before, and I never had a business plan until the time that I needed um, a line of credit. One of the companies I started was generally we were built. This was back in the early days of personal computers, and we were building them. This is when people were building them in their garages and then selling them. But I needed to be able to buy parts to build 10, 15 computers. So I needed a line of credit. They wouldn't do that without a business plan. So my accountant helped me create a business plan that would work with the bank. I think in my mind, business plans are absolutely necessary when you're going to somebody for venture capital. Now, are they necessary to get a business started? Well, I think that depends upon at what point do you say you're starting a business? Are they coming up with an idea and researching that idea? At that point, they don't have enough knowledge to build a business plan. And a business plan often has to include how many units you think you're going to make, what are your potential sales, et cetera. You can't really come up with that unless you've actually got a prototype, unless you've maybe done some interviews with some of the prospective customers. So I think that's where the dividing line is. The mindset part comes way before the business plan.
To kind of piggyback off what Monty said, I definitely heard some of the testimonials, like anti-business plan, and
Yeah,
a lot of our, especially like just within our demographic and those who are helping, they've already kind of started on their
yeah,
business.
yeah.
Um, in our incubator, like for our 1 million cups meetings, most of these,
This might not be the best training for those that are already past that point.
I understood. So I think that's one thing. I'm struggling to find like the right candidate to give this, because we do give business consultations, and sometimes there's individuals who may be on the very preliminary.
Okay. All right, I was going to cover this at the end, but let me just say that what we're doing here in our first 3 sessions are going to be the way that ELI intended the course to be used.
Okay.
In our last session, I'm going to show you many other ways that the course is being used, not necessarily to feed the fast track type of courses. And there's something new that they have on the horizon. I don't think it will be ready until end of first quarter next year, but it will perfectly fit what you guys are doing and work within those that are already in the incubator. And being trained facilitators, you will already have access to it. But they are in the move to kind of break up some of the courses and concepts so that you can use concepts with somebody. Let's say that somebody had a problem with not understanding or needing to have more knowledge about the particular product and the industry in which they're in, even though they've already started a business and gone there. They will have broken up some of the components so that you can then piecemeal only that part of it to them, the knowledge and how to get that knowledge and how to surround yourself with people with that particular knowledge. So there's a lot of different ways to use the course. And I think it will fit what you guys are doing perfectly. I'll explain more when we get to that last session. Okay, shall we move on? Okay, what we're going to do here is we're going to look at a slide and then go to a discussion, then another slide and go to a discussion. So we're going to look at the 8 core concepts. The first one being power to choose. So in lesson 1, we're going to talk about 8 lessons. That's the 8 life lessons from the book and the course. In lesson 1, the training objectives is to learn to explore in your vision, how your own vision through an exercise in LMS. You're going to use the LMS and it's going to help you move through the vision of what it is you're trying to do and where you can take your idea or your product. Number 2 is influence. It's in a moment we're going to explore that influence. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Reacting versus responding. There's an exercise in the LMS that where you'll watch a video clip from the original version of the Ice House program, and then you'll participate in an online discussion on that. And then locus control, we've already talked about the locus of control here. So what I want to know here, this is just a little bit more about power to choose. This is a little clip from the student version of the Ice House programs. It is, I don't want to tell you what business she's in, but this is a girl from Afghanistan, and she broke the mold where women were intended to stay at home and cook and take care of the household and not have jobs because of the culture that they were in. And she chose something different. So she talks about that.
As a young woman born and raised in Afghanistan,
Can you guys hear that?
Pawasha Siddiqui faced an overwhelming amount of cultural resistance, even from some of her closest family and friends, once she decided to follow an entrepreneurial path.
That's the thing, that you should always think that you have control over what's going on around you, and you shouldn't let the environment around you control your decisions. It's all about your determination. Once you're determined that you want something, you can alter everything around you so that they actually lead you to, getting to where you want to be. I mean, it's deciding to, get a job or work in Afghanistan. Let's leave coming to the States, and that's like another big step that I took. But the first step, just for me to decide to get a job as a, young girl and go out to work during the day instead of being at home and cooking. That was a huge decision, and the like environment every day was they tried kind of to remind me that I have decided that I've chosen the wrong thing, but I knew that it wasn't wrong. I was doing the right thing. So I could have come under the pressure of that and quit my job and then sat at home just like hundreds of other girls. I know a lot of my friends who actually, a lot of my colleagues at work, they worked for 2 or 3 months, and then they said, okay, I can't put up with this cultural pressure. You know, I just can't. Every day I am walking to work, I'm coming to work, I don't know, hear my family, like my cousins talk about me. It's just not good for the name of the family or for the girl's pride. So I know people who just gave up like that, but that encouraged me more. That no, I that shouldn't happen. I shouldn't give up for these cultural norms. Why should I? And so I was really determined, and I didn't let that environment affect me, but instead, I was one of the brave women who did actually decide to go to work, and now because of that, I'm sure hundreds of other women were encouraged to go to work, because there are a lot more women working now than in 2001, let's say, when right after the fall of Taliban.
So the question is, what influences do your students need to overcome in order to be successful? So if you think about the people you would put through your program, what do you think is an influence that they need to overcome? A belief maybe, or something from their past.
Cultural norms, um, like cultural norms, like how she had to overcome that with staying at home, cooking and cleaning. Some people have like family members who aren't accustomed to seeing, you know, people go into like the entrepreneurial tracks. It's kind of like, hey, go, clock in, work a 9 to 5, whether it's with your hands or something like that. So pursuing an entrepreneurial track is kind of risky, and sometimes people outwardly just say, hey, you're not going to do it. You're going to fail. So sometimes they have to like deal with their family and their culture, kind of telling them not to do it.
Right. I mean, obviously financial risk, but I think creating a structure going from whether that's school, family, another job that you fall in line with the structure, but how do you create your own structure and forming a business to not only hire yourself to feed your family, but to hire others? I think it just seems hard.
Let's go to the next one. You see what I mean? Can you guys see her? Down, down. Go, go find your Nani. The lesson 2 training objectives are recognizing opportunities. So here we want to teach the students that to see problems as opportunities. And next week, we're going to get into this. We're going to use the opportunity discovery process and what ELI calls the discovery canvas. That's sort of an adaptation of the business canvas that you're familiar with, to take a problem and analyze what possible solutions are, what people say about them, etc. And now you will take your students through this exercise. So we want you to know about the exercise. We're not going to go through the full thing, but we do want to let you know what the concept is so you're familiar with it. Then there's fatal assumptions, these false assumptions about what it takes to succeed as an entrepreneur. were described in somewhat earlier today, but it will come more to light in the opportunity discovery process as it focuses on the managerial skills, et cetera. And opportunistic adaptation is what we're going to look at right now with a little film clip. We're also going to cover prior work experience in the coming slides. And the rest of this lesson 2 is going to be about enthusiastic and somewhat inexperienced. What is the popular belief that entrepreneurs are experts in their field? They don't have to be experts in their field. And we're going to look at simple solutions and hope theory. So for now, let's look at a clip from the training on opportunistic adaptation.
This process is known as opportunistic adaptation. It is a process that can occur in several ways. For some, opportunistic adaptation occurs in the early stages of an entrepreneurial endeavor. As the entrepreneur sets out in search of his or her first customers, they often encounter an unexpected opportunity along the way. Sometimes, often after countless rejections, a potential customer will make alternative requests that will expose a greater opportunity, one that would have been previously unknown. For others, opportunistic adaptation occurs over a long period of time. As their business slowly evolves, and as the entrepreneur's abilities continue to grow, much larger opportunities often begin to emerge, opportunities that would have been impossible to foresee. This process can take place over a period of years or even decades. Opportunistic adaptation requires constant experimentation and persistence, combined with open-mindedness and agility, the ability to listen to what people want and need rather than what you want them to buy.
So the question here is, which of these areas for growth do your students need most help with? Persistence or open-mindedness or outside-in perspective?
I
Do you find they're closed-minded about stuff?
I think so. I feel like there are people who will, at least for some of my consultations, they're apprehensive with like getting on social media to talk about their brand, or really just sharing it outside of any of the old-fashioned ways. That's something that I've learned, that just marketing, getting on your phone to talk to people is a hard thing.
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Keith's early experience as a teenager sharpened his awareness and would later lead to yet another much larger opportunity.
I got into manufacturing and right out of the auto parts business. So I had the job as the quality manager, and I was in the position of sending instruments out for repair and calibration. And I was astonished at how terrible the quality and the service was. And, you know, being a natural person, I was looking for the next business opportunity, because at that time I had rental property and I had my real estate license. So after work I was still doing something. But now at work I'm seeing another business opportunity. So I started I did my own research at work by sending instruments out to other companies and trying to learn more and more about who's doing what. And I found out that there was a need for someone who was really serious about this and who cared about it. And I happen to like precision measuring tools, so I focused on that, and then I got specialized training in it. I sold the rental property I had. I used that to buy the equipment to start my business.
So he went into the business of aligning tools for business. This is an example of problems are opportunities. So what opportunities do you see in your workplace that you could further explore?
Freddie, like since you've become the expert in marketing and answering a lot of people's problems, people see that I do the marketing for Lead too, and they ask me to do the marketing, and I've actually been able to moonlight a couple projects to contract with these companies that are scared to do that marketing or scared, and that's an opportunity within our workplace. I know it's kind of hush hush, but um, just for a personal example of, but I think most entrepreneurs, this applies to the broad class of, I think that that's how they become interested and recognize problems as they're working for a company, learn the field, and figure out how to make it better and spin off and do their own thing. I feel like that's the most common entrepreneur, right?
Yeah. So there's a reason why we're doing the training this way. One of the things you will do with your students is prompt them with questions and have them discuss the questions amongst themselves and with you. This is another dimension to the type of training that the Ice House program gives you. So we are really done with today's lessons. Like I said, we'll be done earlier than 2 hours with just the three of us here. But I wanted to give you a little peek as to what is coming for you. Next week, you'll do the pre-work in the LMS, and that's training lectures 3 and 4, a discussion forum on solving problems for others, and review chapters 3 and 4 in the book. Now, when you do it for yourself, you have the opportunity to buy the books for your students if you want, but the course comes with the PDF versions, one chapter at a time as they're needed, as you've probably already determined. So there's no need to buy the book if you want to use those online versions of it. Next week, we're also going to jump into the discovery opportunity discovery process using the Canvas and mapping out a problem and its potential solutions. The following, I wanted to note that today was full of a lot of lecture and theory. We won't have that the rest of the course. So if you were bored of the first hour, as I think you probably were, we won't be doing that again. We'll be doing more experiential things. On week 3, we'll look at your discovery canvases, but most of the class will be 2 different entrepreneurs that I will invite in I'll have a set of questions for them, and then you'll be able to ask some questions of them also. I am looking for entrepreneurs within your areas and within your age groups. But if I can't find what I'm looking for, then I'll pull some from Daytona area that I've always used. This is something that you will do with your class, and it's important that when you're trying to teach them to think like an entrepreneur and that they can do it, it's important that they see relatable entrepreneurs. And by relatable, I mean if we put up the guy who created the equestrian center, for example, he's not going to be relatable to them because he probably had tons of funding available to him and lots of connections, and your students will not have that yet. I'm looking at what ELI calls the nascent entrepreneurs, the everyday unlikely entrepreneurs, and how they made a go at it. And then the last week we're going to kind of wrap it up with the a couple of lectures, but then we're going to talk more about implementation, plans for implementation. I'll show you some ways that other people are using the course and some possibilities that you can go into, and tell you a little bit about what ELI has planned for next year, which I think is really, really exciting. So with that being said, is there any questions from today's work?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Thank you both for attending and agreeing to come through the course. I think this is going to serve your community well once you get started with it. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording and we'll end it for today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. And maybe I'll see you tomorrow, Monty.
All right, maybe.